The unwavering agent. The low sun cast long orange streaks across the tall cypress trees lining Cypress Bend Road. Special Agent Caleb Vance was 15 minutes from home after a 12-hour workday of interviews and paperwork. He wasn't speeding. He was simply replaying tomorrow's debriefing in his head when the flashing blue lights appeared in his rear-view mirror. No siren, just the silent, insistent lights. He eased his charcoal gray SUV to the side of the road, near a small, empty church parking lot. Caleb cut the engine, lowered his windows halfway, and placed both hands on the steering wheel, a practice routine for a black man in a dark vehicle on a rural road. The cruiser door slammed with a little more force than necessary, and Caleb's side mirror caught a glimpse of the young officer approaching. A clean-cut, square-jawed man, maybe in his early 30s. License and registration. Step out of the car. The voice was sharp, loud, and instantly irritated. No introduction, no explanation. Caleb kept his voice low and even. Sir, I prefer to stay in the vehicle. I'm a federal agent, DEA. I'm carrying, and my credentials are in my inner left pocket. I can hand them to you slowly. The officer squinted, shaking his head as if he'd heard it all before. Get out of the vehicle. I'm following protocol, Caleb insisted. I'm informing you that I'm armed and on active duty. Just let me show you my badge and ID. The officer didn't budge, his hand now resting on his duty belt. You fit the description of a suspect. Caleb exhaled slowly. What suspect? I'll ask the questions, the officer snapped. Either you comply, or I escalate. Caleb slowly reached with 2 fingers into his pocket, making sure his movements were deliberate and visible. He pulled out his bureau badge and ID card, flipping it open. Special Agent Caleb Vance, New Orleans Field Office. You're making a mistake. The officer leaned forward, smirked, and glanced at the ID for a fleeting second before stepping back and speaking into his radio. I've got a possible impersonator. Black male, late 30s, armed, refusing orders, requesting backup now. Caleb's mouth went dry, not from fear, but from a calculated dread. This wasn't a mistake. It was a deliberate choice. He spoke louder, knowing a body camera was recording. My hands are visible. I have not exited the vehicle. I am a credentialed federal agent and have identified myself clearly. You are escalating the stop without cause. The officer's eyes narrowed. You think I care about your badge? Silence descended, punctuated only by the distant bark of a dog. Caleb glanced at the camera on the patrol car's dash, hoping someone would see this later. He knew the next move wasn't his to make. It would come from backup, and their reaction might not be so composed. The officer, whose name was Officer Denton, paced back and forth, his hand hovering over his holster. He seemed convinced he had won. Caleb remained still, the badge and ID resting on his dashboard. Last chance, Denton said. Either you step out of the car, or I'll extract you myself. And I'm telling you, I am not a threat, Caleb replied evenly. If you escalate this, it's on you. Denton returned to his cruiser and called for immediate backup again. Caleb stared ahead, his jaw tight. He was no rookie. He'd spent the last 5 years investigating officer misconduct in the region. Now he was living it. This wasn't about crime. It was about control, a man with a badge playing God on a roadside 0.3 tenths minutes later. A second cruiser pulled up. A veteran officer, a woman in her late 40s, stepped out with a younger, clean-shaven partner. She walked directly to Caleb's window. Sir, she said calmly, do you have identification? Caleb simply pointed to the badge on his dash. Her eyes moved to it, and her expression changed subtly. Are you armed? Yes, Caleb confirmed. Right side holster, standard bureau issue. She nodded, stepped back, and turned to her partner, her voice dropping. Legit? Denton's voice cut in sharply. Are you sure? I don't buy it. The credentials look fake. The female officer gave him a flat look. Have you seen many? Denton said nothing. She keyed her shoulder mic and asked dispatch to run the ID number. Caleb knew what was coming. Less than 60 seconds later, the voice on the radio came through, scratchy but clear, confirmed. Caleb Vance, Special Agent. Active badge number matches bureau records. The female officer folded her arms, her eyes fixed on Denton. He stood there, stunned, for 10 full seconds. He finally broke the silence, walking to Caleb's window, his voice now a forced calm. "Agent Vance, you understand we had to be cautious." Caleb rolled down the window the rest of the way. "You never asked for ID. You ordered me out at gunpoint. Then you called for backup claiming I was an impersonator. There was no cause, and you know that. Don't try to pin this on protocol." Denton stiffened. The other 2 officers kept their distance. "Do you know how many officers I've interviewed in misconduct cases?" Caleb continued, his voice calm but sharp. "Over 200. You all say the same thing. I was just being cautious." "But caution doesn't look like this. Caution listens. Caution checks the badge first." The female officer, Officer Greer, stepped in. "You're lucky, Troy, because if he wasn't who he said he was and you'd escalated this, we'd be here sorting out your mess with the coroner." Caleb finally exhaled. He wasn't just fighting for his own life. He was showing everyone watching that staying calm didn't mean surrender. A 3rd cruiser pulled up, and a sergeant named Alistair Reed stepped out. After a quick briefing from Greer, Reed turned to Caleb. "Agent Vance, I saw the dashcam footage. He never asked, never checked. You did everything right. There was no miscommunication," Caleb said flatly. "There was a refusal to listen." Reed didn't argue. He turned to Denton. "Back of the line. No more talking." Denton's mouth tightened, but he obeyed. Reed then spoke to Caleb in a low voice. "I'll be calling your bureau, supervisor myself." "Don't bother," Caleb said. "He already knows. He's the one who asked me to wear a wire tonight." Reed froze. Caleb let the revelation sink in before retrieving his badge and ID. "An internal audit," he explained to the other officers. Officer Denton's name came up in a pattern of complaints. He then opened his door and stepped out. "I was driving home. But now," he said, looking at Denton, "the next move is personal. Hashtag the public uproar." The moment Caleb stepped out, the entire energy of the street shifted. He stood tall, his eyes moving from one officer to the next. Not one of them could meet his gaze for long. "You had your chance to do the right thing," Caleb said to Denton. He then turned to Sergeant Reed. "I'm not stepping foot in your department unless my bureau liaison is present, and you'll have your internal affairs director sitting right beside you." He walked back to his SUV, retrieved a folder from his laptop bag, and handed it to Reed. It contained a half-dozen typed complaints against Denton. As Reed flipped through the pages, his face changed. "This is detailed," he muttered. "It's not even a full list," Caleb said. "We got body cam redactions and audio inconsistencies. One complaint says the footage from a stop just disappeared." Reed looked at Denton, who now avoided all eye contact. "You want to de-escalate this?" Caleb said to Reed. "Good. Start by putting him on administrative leave immediately. No desk duty, no street badge, and no weapon." Reed gave a tired nod and signaled to the junior officer, who slowly walked over and retrieved Denton's duty belt piece by piece. It was the slowest unmaking of a uniform Caleb had ever seen, but he felt no satisfaction. This was long overdue, and it shouldn't have taken an FBI badge to make anyone listen. As Caleb drove off, the story was already beginning to unfold. He called his partner. "Agent Patel, I need everything we got on Denton pulled up tonight. Internal Affairs is about to open a case, but I don't trust them to look past their own front door." By the time he arrived home, his phone was buzzing with an unknown number. It was Sergeant Reed. Someone leaked the footage. Reed's voice was low and tired. "It's everywhere. 2 neighbors had doorbell cams, and their videos are already making rounds on social media." "You never had control," Caleb said flatly. "He's claiming you set him up," Reed admitted. "He said this was some kind of trap." Caleb's laugh was bitter. "All I did was sit there. That was the entire threat. A black man who didn't panic." Reed paused. He said something to me right after you drove off. He said he didn't see anything wrong. He just saw someone who didn't look like he belonged. "And there it is," Caleb said, his grip tightening on the phone. "That's the problem. Hashtag, hashtag, hashtag a new chapter. The next day, a crowd gathered outside the courthouse. A retired teacher named Eleanor Maddox stood at the center, a microphone clipped to her shirt. "This ain't just about Agent Vance," she said. "This is about how easily some people still see us as a threat. If a DEA badge doesn't protect them, then what protects our sons and fathers?" The protest grew, fueled by social media and news coverage. Inside his home, Caleb's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. One name stood out: Kendra Louvier, a federal prosecutor he'd worked with. "Caleb," she said, "this isn't just misconduct. It's pattern-based. This department's a ticking bomb, and you just set the timer." "I didn't set it," Caleb replied. "I just refused to pretend it wasn't already counting down." The incident sparked new conversations everywhere, from dinner tables to classroom discussions. But as the community grew louder, Officer Denton sat alone, the weight of his choices crashing down. His lawyer told him the DOJ Civil Rights Division had opened a formal inquiry. He was facing a disciplinary hearing and the very real possibility of losing his badge forever. "This is my life," Denton said. "Then take it seriously," his lawyer replied, "because this is bigger than you." Denton looked in the mirror, barely recognizing the man staring back. He thought about all the moments he had done the right thing, yet none of it mattered now. The whole world had seen the look in his eyes, the tone in his voice. Days later, Caleb sat in a quiet podcast studio, ready to speak publicly for the first time. The host, Vernon Slate, asked him why here, why now. "Because the people who need to hear this aren't sitting in a marble office in D.C., Caleb said. "They're sitting in classrooms, in patrol cars, at kitchen tables. And if I'm going to talk, it has to be for them." He spoke without holding back. "I'm Caleb Vance. I've been a DEA agent for 11 years. Last week, I got pulled over by an officer who didn't care what I said. He saw someone he didn't trust, not because of a tip or my behavior, but because I didn't flinch. And if it wasn't enough for me, with a federal badge, what chance does a teenager have driving home from practice with a broken taillight?" Caleb continued, "This isn't about good cops or bad cops. It's about a culture that rewards fear over curiosity. I didn't survive that stop because I was lucky. I survived because I knew how not to scare him. And that should never be the skill that keeps us alive." He finished by urging people to act. Start local. Know your city council. Know your sheriff. File a complaint. We don't fix this with hashtags alone. We fix it with action. The recording ended. Caleb walked out into the warm Louisiana air, not in fear or anger, but in clarity. He didn't want to become a story. He just wanted to go home. But now that the world was listening, he wouldn't waste it. He started outlining a policy proposal, a project aimed at redefining field training for officers in small departments. He hit record on his phone. "Day one," he said, "starts with telling the truth. And here's mine. If you're watching this and it made you pause, don't stop there. Share it. Talk about it. Challenge someone. Because silence won't fix anything, but your voice might.